Last week, we talked about the story of Job and how Job complained and complained and complained. And then God answered it. And when God answered, Job was speechless. But finally, when God stopped and allowed Job to speak again, this is Job's response. It comes from the book of Job, chapter 42, beginning in verse 1 and going through verse 17. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything, and no one can stop you. You ask, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? It is I, and I was talking about things I knew nothing about, things far too wonderful for me. You said, listen, and I will speak. I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. So take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job, and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer on your behalf. I will not treat you as you deserve, for you have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did as the Lord commanded them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. When Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as before. Then all his brothers, sisters, and former friends came and feasted with him in his home. And they consoled him and comforted him because all of the trials the Lord had brought against him. And each of them brought him a gift of money and a gold ring. So the Lord blessed Job in the second half of his life, even more than in the beginning. For now he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 teams of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also gave Job 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. He named his first daughter Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen-Happuch. In all the land no women were as lovely as the daughters of Job, and their father put them into his will along with their brothers. Job lived 140 years after that, living to see 4 generations of his children and grandchildren. Then he died, an old man who had lived a long, full life. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
2 friends, we'll call them Eli and Matthew, played together every day at recess. Eli was the youngest boy in his class, and he was also the smallest. And he was afraid of just about everything, especially heights. Every day, while everyone else looked forward to recess, looked forward to going outside to play with their friends, Eli would be scared and anxious. He couldn't run very fast. He couldn't kick a ball very accurately. And he couldn't even muster up the courage to slide down the big slide all by himself, because he was afraid of heights. Matthew, on the other hand, was the kid who was always picked first for dodgeball. He was tall and strong, and even at a young age, he already looked like an athlete. But Eli was his friend. He always had been. And so Matthew became Eli's biggest cheerleader. He would stand behind Eli on the slide singing, "Go, Eli, go. You can do this." And when they were playing soccer together on the field and Eli got the ball, he would chant, "Go, Eli, go. You can do this." Every day Matthew sang, "Go, Eli, go. You can do this." And over time, with Matthew's continuous encouragement, Eli grew more fearless, and he began to actually enjoy recess and playing outside with the other children in his class. Then one day Matthew became very sick and he was out of school for an entire week. And Eli found himself staring down from the top of the big slide. And he just couldn't do it. And as he turned around to climb back down to safety, to climb back down to solid ground, he heard Matthew's voice in the back of his head chanting, "Go, Eli, go. You can do this." So he turned back around. He conquered his fears and he slid down the big slide all by himself. You see, a good friend, even when they aren't there, can help us to discover things within ourselves that we may never have known existed. Matthew, in many ways, helped to restore Eli's strength and his courage and his faith. And God can see things within us that we cannot see for ourselves, that our mortal eyes are too limited to see. God knew that Job had the strength and the persistence and the perseverance and the faith to go through everything that God allowed Job to go through. He knew that even after losing his loved ones, losing his health, and suffering many sleepless nights, that Job could withstand it. And Job learned so much about God's wisdom in that process. Job finally understands and accepts his own judgment, or the judgment of God. Job understands and accepts that what he believes is right and wrong may not necessarily line up with what God knows. Job learned an invaluable lesson through this experience. He learned to listen. He learned to hear God speak. And he learned to find comfort in God, despite everything that he was going through, everything that he was suffering. There are moments in each of our lives where our own sight is limited. It is limited because it is based on our own experiences and our own perceptions. See, Job could see justice only in terms of what he deemed to be the difference between right and wrong. He judged God and he judged himself within his own parameters, within his own ideas of what he considered righteousness. However, that same God that allowed Job to be persecuted is the same God that restored Job. When Job realized that his sight was limited, that he didn't have the full perspective that God has, he changed, he shifted his expectations. Job, in the beginning of the story, is the recipient of God's blessings, but Job was never fully in control of his health. He was never fully in control of his wealth. He was never fully in control of his relationships with other people, with his friends. God's hand is at work in each and every one of our lives. And it is up to each of us as disciples of Jesus Christ to be obedient to God's will, to trust in God. How does it feel to rely on things that you cannot always see? Why do we feel lost when we cannot be in control, when we can't secure our own lives? How ironic is it that the moment that Job stops trying to figure God out and starts praying is the moment that he is restored by God. When Job accepts that God knows everything and he doesn't, he prays for his friends and God restores him. The word restoration in this particular text is not necessarily referring to the external, to material things. Although Job does regain all of his wealth, doubled, twice as much as before, twofold. But restoration is more accurately translated as the state of being full, abounding, and being content. Ultimately, Job sets an example for us that in spite of our personal pain and our hurt and our hardships, that when we are not in control and we cannot change our situation, that we can change our perspective. We can change how we look at things. Although we may not fully understand the mind of God, the right thing to do is to trust that God is with us, that God is within us, and that God will not fail. God is bigger than any obstacle that we will ever face. And when we do face obstacles, because we will, when we do face those obstacles, God is always there chanting, "Go, my child, go. You can do this." Let us pray.